LC. I'm a blockchain attorney with IBL.law. We've been around since about 2017, so we've seen the different cycles, the different booms, and we are just heavy on the digital ledger technology space and fintech.
Hi, good morning. I'm Bojana Kavar. I'm a broker associate at Parsiani Real Estate, and I'm a proponent on blockchain and Propy certified, crypto certified, metaverse certified.
Uh, Wayne Dennis, entrepreneur, current CTO at PayDirt, background in artificial intelligence, blockchain, prior experiences at Meta, former Accenture senior executive leader, um, and a little tired from moving these chairs around. So,
No, me as well. It just shows how epically out of shape I am, but that's a whole that's a whole other story. I can't believe no one booed Meta. Like, really? You just let that one slide?
yeah, I think they let me slide. So.
Well, it's a great point though, because coming from one of the monolithic players in the space who, if left unchecked, have a huge advantage in kind of muscling their way into tokenization, especially around like non-traditional asset classes. Where do you see opportunities for the young, scrappy insurgents to come in and disrupt that? And I'm thinking not necessarily like the easy, low-hanging fruit of real estate, but the less likely. We brought up an example yesterday of a tokenized Stradivarius. I just looked at a deal for a tokenized vineyard. So opportunities such as that.
Yeah, I think there are opportunities everywhere. I think as the world becomes a bit more globalized, and I think there's like a slight redundancy in that statement, but there are opportunities for monetization all over. I really think it comes down to the community, right? So the developer community, what does that look like currently, right? How active are they in the space? I think the use cases are already well defined, but there are probably more that can, probably that are probably yet to be discovered. I guess my perspective is the stronger the community, the stronger there is a potential for innovation. The more innovation, the more development, the more reinvestment in the community, right? So I think it starts with the developers. I think the developer ecosystem needs to be built out a bit.
I would definitely echo that. I think, especially in the Web3 space, community is the name of the game. It's the only way to keep people engaged, keep people building, but it's also the death knell because if you lose community, if you lose traction, everything shuts down. We've seen an explosion of NFT communities and then it's gone. And we've seen explosions of DAOs and they're gone. And I mean, DAOs could be considered fractionalized communities, basically, or fractionalized companies. And it all depends on how active people are, how engaged they are, how close to the mission they are. Cultivating that, whoever figures that out wins.
And to that point, right, I think there's actually a huge, one would say, market opportunity for like the large tech organizations to really invest and evangelize these communities, right, by incentives, whatever that might look like, right? There's social media, et cetera. There's monetization schemas, there's hackathons, et cetera. There's all these different things that you can do to incentivize creativity and development. We can look at tech companies as almost like first movers in the space, right, for commercial and widespread enterprise adoption. And then after that, right, you start seeing some of the smaller players with similar talent start to get into the space and they essentially start, taking off on their own, right? And now you've got capitalistic centered, right? But nonetheless, entrepreneurship, right? That's now spurned, and it doesn't necessarily have like a central location. No pun intended, right? It can happen anywhere, right? Like it can be in the U.S., it can be in Singapore or Southeast Asia, it can be in Africa, which I'd like to see, right? So there's a lot of ways that this can go, but my perspective is that it starts with community.
Well, you made a great point. You made a great point about capitalization and said more plainly, money flowing into the space. And so the larger players definitely have the capital to deploy. Um, I just see, like you brought up Africa as a great example. Like it's insane that the number one store of value and the number one like currency exchange in the nation in the 54 countries that make up Africa is prepaid mobile minutes. And it's only for the byproduct of the fact it's a predictable store of value because there's so much headline risk on those 54 different currencies outside of maybe the US dollar. And so looking for you, like I would love to talk about like where are the emerging trends? What opportunities do you see here? We talked about like the larger end of the spectrum. outside of real estate, what would you like to see in the next 2, 3, 5 years start to get more attention around tokenization and fractional ownership?
I feel it's really an interesting time. We have entertainment, film, musicians, they're tokenizing their ability with their intellectual properties, getting loyalties on the back end. There's also tokenizing, uh, sports, which I would love to, that's community, going back to what Wayne was mentioning. So those are the industries that I'm really rooting for. I think real estate has, really taken a huge upswing with all the amazing blockchain platforms that help diversify, the scalability and liquefy, for the common person to be able to invest in these projects and, really decentralize the way real estate is happening, because you can, purchase fractionalization, tokenization at an entry level. And a lot of these new developments in Miami have been open to it, especially with the crypto space, the blockchain space. So I feel real estate has really led the way for the entertainment industry that I'd like to see, in addition to commodities. I know there's companies out there that sell gold and mineral rights, all starting to
Diamonds.
enter diamonds, a girl's best friend. So those are industries that we're very excited about and providing liquidity to the masses.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I would say we're seeing an evolution of what's already been. So soccer clubs around the world are kind of fractionalized already. We're seeing it go on chain. We're going to see a lot more activity go on chain just because you can track it. It's transparent. It's immutable. It helps with accountability. It helps with development. It helps to bring the community together to see like how you're progressing and what ways you're progressing, and how to influence where you're heading with what you're involved in. And you're going to see it be a lot easier to exit. So if a DAO is serving you, if a community or a club is serving you, great, you're in it, you're supporting it, you're involved. If it stops serving you, it'll be a lot easier and seamless to exit and go find the community that is serving you.
So I love what you brought up, and especially on the sports franchises. Like, a lot of people don't understand, but soccer is the widest viewed and actually monetized sport on the planet. And many of these lower end clubs and some of the tier ones are actually group owned. Even in the United States, for American football, the Green Bay Packers are a privately held but fractionalized entity. And so it's owned by fans of the organization. Even the Boston Celtics, up until about 25 years ago, were a publicly traded company. So, where would you like to see regulatory guidance come in? I know, Elsie, you were talking about it as we were vamping on our way up onto the stage, but we feel, or at least I feel, like there's going to be a unique perspective of opportunity in, say, the next 9-ish months. What do you think should be forwarded, or what should be talked about by us and ultimately by politicians in DC?
Well, I think first and foremost, just educating on what really is available, like what this technology really does and what it definitely doesn't do, would be the biggest priority I would emphasize for educating politicians, anyone in DC who's going to influence anything. I think we have a great commissioner in Hester Peirce. She is an ideal candidate to step in for Gensler when he is inevitably stepping down. So I think if we can
Or
be
the
more
given the guillotine?
I mean, I tried to be nice about it. But ideally she could step in. She's very pragmatic. I don't want to see just a free for all. I think that would be ultimately damaging for the blockchain space if we just kind of let everything fly. But I think we can definitely be a lot more clear about what we're going after and what we should allow, what we should permit. I think Coinbase has done an incredible job of moving in the space thoughtfully, slowly, and with purpose. I think MetaMask has done a good job. I think Uniswap's done a good job of moving thoughtfully. And if we can use those as best practices or industry standards and have that kind of set the tone for how we're going to approach regulations, I would be grateful. I do think Mika oversteps the European regulations, kind of overstep in a lot of way, because what we don't want to see is the small guys priced out.
I might have a different take. I just happen to just evolve from the school of thought that technology sets policy and not the other way around. And I think like over the last 5 years across various disciplines, AI, blockchain, name your buzzword, right? We've done a really bad job at trying to control the spurt of innovation. And I think that's hurt us in the long run, right? I think now we're kind of entering a space where we're over-regulating a number of different areas. And I'm not just picking on, Web3 or blockchain or anything like that. I'm just thinking that maybe if we were a bit more thoughtful about the problems that we were trying to solve and put more money into solving those problems instead of just trying to necessarily monetize everything or prevent people from losing money. Not that those aren't important things, right? But we probably have a lot more insights into what drives behaviors, and then we can curb some of the more harmful behaviors. Um, that's just my thought process. I don't necessarily know that like regulation is a bad thing, right? But I do think where we are today, maybe more can be done, but I'm not seeing the innovation that I expected to see in 2025.
I actually said it yesterday on this stage. Like, it's the first time in my lifetime that I've seen a government actively push a technology offshore. So specific to blockchain, like we've gone seemingly out of our way over the last several years to push innovation, capitalization, inflows of capital to other sovereign nations who were more welcoming of the technology.
Yeah, exactly, right. That adoption is taking off in economies that we used to consider low cost, right? And so they're reaping all the benefits and they're automating it, they're monetizing it, they're growing it, they're finding new problems to solve, and they're finding new utilities. And most importantly, they're learning, right? They're learning how to deal with, they're teaching their infrastructure, their workforce how to deal with these, not only technologies, but these problems and how to solve them in a different, more innovative way, right? And so I don't see that same level of care right here in the USA, right? I think we're behind, frankly. I think we're behind Singapore. I think we're behind Japan, right? I remember back when I was at Accenture, I implemented a track and trace blockchain solution for a large supply chain organization, right? And they were basically shipping body parts, frankly, right? And I just thought it was so innovative, right? This network of companies, banding together to implement a real blockchain solution. I just like, man, why can't I do this here in the US? Why do I have to travel all the way to Japan? It was fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, had a great time. Excellent sushi, but like it was just really demoralizing, right? And I think that's more than just, with respect to Web3. I think what I'm saying has a lot of other, you know, applications. I think this exists in a lot of other spaces. But, in this particular space, I would double down on that. I think that we could do more innovating.
I think that's because there's been a lack of regulation, though. Like, we don't have a clear path forward in America, whereas Singapore, Switzerland, Japan all have frameworks, and they had frameworks early for how to move in the space without being afraid. It's not that people can't build here because the regulations say no. It's it's the after action of building here and the SEC coming after you. It's that fear because we don't know what's working. So I think if we get thoughtful framework, you'll see all that activity and innovation come right back because we know how to move safely, we know where we can move safely, and we want to be here.
Yeah, I don't
I,
think we disagree.
Yeah, yeah.
I would love to see the SEC get more supportive behind these blockchain companies and, assist us as innovators and technology as it advances to approve, the STOs and be able to do our AML and KYCs and let us really move forward and not be limited because anytime you try to do a tokenization raise, you got the SEC wondering how they fit in with all the security laws. So I think once they get their act together, I think it's going to just propel all the technological companies.
Absolutely. We're rooting for Hester Purse.
Agree.
You don't think a Wells notice is the gift every entrepreneur wants to show up on their desk? Really? Um, so given that, like you brought up great points, and obviously, talking about innovation being spurred abroad, I think what they've done is they've been inclusive and welcoming, which is a great jumping off point, but they've also given a absolutely broad and roomy highway into which to operate. So versus the US regulatory policy thus far has been, hey, stop signs everywhere you look, everywhere you could possibly turn. And God forbid you knock on our door and actually ask for guidance, because then we're just going to come back to you after the fact and say, no, in point of fact, we're not going to allow you to do that. So it's fascinating. What were you going to, I'm sorry, you looked like you were going to jump in. So with that being said, we feel like if we're looking in our short-term crystal ball, there is going to be a really seminal opportunity going forward. What would you be advocating or evangelizing as far as like projects that you'd either capitalize yourself or you'd like to see sort of pick up that early mantle of leadership in this next innovation wave? So, like, is it a major Fortune 500 company tokenizing some pool of their assets? Is it even leaning into like tokenization around IP for certain entertainment rights? I was just out in LA a couple weeks ago and I looked at a major catalog that you would want access to, and they're looking at doing exactly that. They're going to put an offer out of tokenization, and you'd get access to the catalog first and foremost, but then you'd actually participate in the trailing royalty structure as well, which I thought was very interesting. So, thoughts on where you'd like to see things go?
I'm working for the company. Like I mean, you know, real estate backed
Yeah.
securities, right? Like I think I'm in the space already. I want to give someone else a chance to.
I would say real estate is the greatest form to wealth. So decentralizing that and making that accessible to everyone is really going to provide the wealth for the next generation. So I really would want to put all my chips in on decentralizing developments, hedge funds, and giving access to everyone that should have access, because the commoner does not have the liquidity that all these big companies have, but they can start slowly and start investing and grow that liquidity. And I think that should be accessible to everyone and decentralize the real estate industry.
I mean, real estate's the global unlock. I mean, not only in the US or more liquid markets, but in many of these illiquid markets where property rights aren't actually memorialized, that could be the opportunity and the catalyst and springboard to really propel their overall economies, let alone just real estate forward. I actually read a fascinating and also wildly depressing stat about the United States. A minimum wage earner in this country, there is no county in the United States in all 50 states where they could afford the median price of a two-bedroom apartment rent on just that salary. So we are setting these folks up for failure. And you couple that with the fact that 30% of Americans couldn't come up with a down payment, a 20% down payment on the average sales price of a home. So it seems like the system is ripe for disruption. So I agree with you. That is the foundational element. I'm just fascinated to see as we start to stack and we get those moments of success with real estate, where else do we start to build from there?
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we're going to see the traditional world go on chain and you'll see the natural development. So you'll see real world assets get fractionalized and put it on chain. You'll see companies navigate blockchain through internal and incentivized programs for their employees. You'll see mini DAOs form that are akin to a company, but kind of fractionalizing it in a more fluid way. But then I also think you'll see this other track of just weird experimentation. And that's where the real innovation and excitement will catch on and will catch fire and will become pervasive. So even with the failures we've seen so far, like Constitution DAO was ultimately a failure because they didn't buy the Constitution. But if you look at what happened and how quickly capital was moved among millions, like over a million people bought into Constitution DAO in a period of like 48 hours. That big fundraise, that immediate overnight fundraise of moving that much capital for one myopic purpose is powerful. And that's also so weird. So people need to indulge in the weird innovations, see where we can go with that, play around with what this future could be, not just, oh, let's get more creative with the corporation. It's like, let's change what community can do as a collective. Let's change how we tackle problems. Let's go for one myopic problem, not an entire company of problems, like an entire organization of problems. Let's really nail in on one specific thing, tackle it like a scalpel precision, and go after it and see how quickly we can move, see how quickly capital can make stuff happen. Those kinds of creative solutions, those will be the most innovative.
I again agreed with you. One of the things I was thinking, I've been thinking about this for a long time, is actually voting. I actually,
Voting should be on blockchain.
I tell people this all the time, right? If I can bank online, right, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to vote online. I think it solves a lot of key issues, right? Um, access to vote being one, right? Convenience, et cetera, and most importantly, accuracy, right? So as someone that got his start in the cybersecurity space, right, it's just something that I'm just kind of like, channeling my inner Peter, like, why aren't we funding this? Like, so like, why hasn't that been done yet? So that's
I think that's coming. Now that we have zero knowledge proofs to be able to verify the information we need, the next iteration would be verifying digital identity. And since everyone's social security number just got hacked a few months ago, like we need a solution now to be able to prove that this digital version of me is very much me and has no chance of being anyone else. So the first person to solve for digital identity will then, I think, lead the way for all kinds of activities, particularly voting.
I'll get back to
I would like to see a capital raise for AI because it's so much on the forefront where, we can invest in tokenization with these startup companies so we can reap the benefits on the back end.
Private equity markets, I've said for quite some time, giving access to the opportunities because I'm sure the audience knows, but to participate in most of these private investments, you have to be an accredited investor, which more than the plurality, certainly the majority of this country would not be able to participate in. But that's where true wealth creation is often generated from. That's why I feel like we've seen this explosion of meme coins. It is the opportunity for them in their own way to be able to participate in these markets. But the likes of early stage investments into an open AI or a SpaceX or any of these other opportunities, it's just not there yet. So we kind of went in reverse order because I was thrown off by our starting point. But I'd love you to address like voting. To me, I'm passionate about that, and I think it's just a broken system. And it's nothing to do with politics. I just think like
or real
it's
estate.
yeah, no, I mean, obviously. But I'd like to talk about like what are the advantages of that? I mean, it's 24/7 real-time liquidity, but touch on some of the other advantages of even doing this as a primary thought.
I think it would answer a lot of questions.
Yeah.
A lot of questions that people have with respect to, if they voted, right, and did their vote count. I think for me, I grew up with the voter's paradox of, if I vote, does anything actually matter? Like, does my vote actually matter, right? Does it really change anything? And I think that right now a lot of people are operating off of hope, right? That this idea, this belief, just throwing effectively what amounts to good energy into the wind would essentially come back and generate like political returns for them. And I don't necessarily know that that's a sustainable system, right? Particularly for people that feel like they're disenfranchised or their interests aren't represented, et cetera. I believe that people should vote for their interests, right? I should, vote for their interests, vote for what they believe in, et cetera. But it means something, and being able to show traceability between your vote, it's being counted. There's no speculation around that. I think that's really important. I also think before, like I said earlier, right, the access to vote, right, having, being able to vote like, in your bedroom or, on the train or the tube, wherever you are, right? And to that point, internationally, right? I imagine that in the next 40, 50 years, we'll probably have international elections for various things, right? Why isn't the EU doing this, right? And if they are, I didn't know, but I'm assuming that they're not, right? That would solve a lot of issues. And then being able to like really tap into your base as a politician, right? Where are you seeing like the real numbers? You no longer have to worry about things like, gerrymandering. There's all sorts of things that all sorts of problems that it solves. I don't know that it solves a cybersecurity problem, but we'll get.
I saw this move. I thought you were going for it.
Oh, no, I just was hanging on my microphone.
Um,
Sorry, could you ask the question?
No, I was just like, what are the primary advantages of fractionalized ownership to start with? Like, and I'm going to nuance that question around legal protections for you, but no, like people don't understand that by fractionalizing, you can often break down these asset classes in a way that make them more affordable and attainable, as an
Oh,
example.
I thought you were asking about voting.
No, no, no. I was just
So,
talking in general, but
oh,
I
okay.
love your
He
idea
was.
around
I didn't
voting.
want to talk about politics. I diverted it to re-ask the question so I
Yeah.
can,
No,
answer
you're
it specifically to
100%
my
right.
industry. So my
Yeah.
apologies. You were
What are the
going.
primary benefits?
To tokenization. It's just an incredible way to give everybody such access to liquidity, and being on the blockchain, it's immutable, so it gives you the full transparency, which is what's been lacking in the politics realm in the real estate world. So it provides you transparency. It's breaking up the brick and mortar traditional way of doing business. You could literally be on your phone, and you could be, no matter what part of the world you're in, you could be accessing your mobile device and making acquisitions and purchases, and not waiting for your real estate agent or broker to be up at 9 o'clock in Miami and shut down at 5. You could be operable. And I love the fact that, you control your destiny by working 24/7 on that platform. So the whole world is becoming at your fingertips. So I think it's really revolutionizing the way we do business.
I think it's one of the reasons the younger generation has gravitationally gone towards crypto is because it's a 24/7 real-time liquid market. So I'd like to say, what are the benefits of fractionalization? But also, with those benefits, do you feel like people are giving up any sort of potential legal protections?
Well, I'm gonna be the attorney and say it depends.
That was a
So,
15-minute chunk of billable time.
yeah, you're welcome. But I really do think there's definitely advantages in that it could be, depending on how you structure it and the vehicles you use, it could be more fluid, meaning like you can get in or get out quicker or easier. You can have less restrictions on transfers. But if you don't want that, you can also empower yourself to have a little bit more restrictions on transfers if that's what you're trying to build in terms of, do you want to keep this community tight and collective, or do you want to have this be a fluid market? So you kind of have to choose your path. But I think putting it as a fractionalized option and setting up proper paperwork and registrations will allow you to serve yourself a little bit more specifically in the path you want to take. So you get to choose your own adventure a little bit better in this world.
That's always a nice phrase with investing. Choose your own adventure. So
I wish we could fractionalize my taxes.
October 15th was a dark day for me, but anyways. So in these closing couple minutes, I'd love to hear just a little bit about specifically what you're doing or what you're most passionate about. I know it's going to be the company that you're currently working with, but I'd love to give you the microphone for that.
Yeah, so I'm partnering. Is my co-founder in the room, Scott? Hey, Scott. There's Scott. Say hi to Scott, guys.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, Scott. Yeah. Partnering with Scott. Scott's a genius around the real estate pieces. Like slightly below that with respect to the tech. And so, we came together and bringing, our superpowers, our talents, right, to build this company that really, again, predicates its value within the real estate, within the real estate mortgage space, right? And so, putting that on chain, et cetera, really commercializing that and creating opportunities for those that may exist outside the country, et cetera, to can now invest here in the U.S. And I think it's amazing. Outside of that, I like long walks on the beach and ice cream, et cetera. Really big car guy. But yeah, this takes up a lot of my time.
Hosanna.
Amazing. I am excited to work with, and I believe Julio's in the room. If you guys know Julio, if he can wave his hand with Brinks. He's
Hi,
the
Julio.
Hi, Julio.
Hi, Julio. Excited to work with him on fractionalizing real estate, and he's one of the first ones moving forward with the SEC approval to fractionalize real estate and bring the wealth to everybody and make it accessible. So I'm very excited about that future.
Laura.
I'm working with anyone that's doing anything in the space. Like, we're a boutique blockchain firm, so I get to touch on some wildly interesting projects and some traditional stuff that's just kind of going on chain. So I get to see just a broad range of really cool stuff and really interesting stuff. And I'll actually be at DevCon next week in Bangkok, talking to a bunch of developers about what the next iteration of Web3 will be.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, and
Thank you.
thank you, panelists.